Afreximbank TV.
So yesterday in the panel discussion, we heard how development financial institutions on the continent need to be more empowered to be able to close the gap. So they need to be able to lend 50, 100, $150 billion a year. So how do we get there? How do we recapitalize our banks? What's the solution to be able to empower them to be able to lend to resolve some of the problems that we have, such as the challenges in infrastructure, climate finance, etc.?
Mm-hmm. So here is the problem. We need to be able to, first of all, deal with the financing gap, which is quite wide at the moment, because of declining ODA, because of the debt issues, and the declining fiscal base. So the resources are declining at the time when needs are widening. So we need to think imaginatively how to reinforce the capability of our institutions, all right, to be part of this financing gap. All of them, regional, continental organizations. So the first thing is shareholder support. We need to increase our shareholder support to our own institutions. And a number of proposals exist on the table. You know, here's a problem you need to think about. We're at a point in the world where something extraordinary is happening. What you call the global north is aging. And so the level of savings is increasing. Even if you increase robotization, machines don't consume. You increase productivity, but you not increase consumption and investment. So the rate of return on investments on those savings outside technology like artificial intelligence is declining. Okay. Now on the other side, in the global south, demographics are on the rise, but savings are negative. Now, if you invest in the global south, you actually have positive return. So what we need in financial institutions is an intermediation process between where there is savings, where there is need for investment, and demographics on the rise. And I want to see African financial institutions play a role in that intermediation. So we need to give them greater shareholder support, capitalize them where need be, and provide them instruments which they can use to be part of the intermediation. It is the only way to put an end to the cycle of aid and debt, which has been the mainstay of our financing the last 25 years.
Okay, and in terms of the reform of the global financial architecture, so you think the reform is strengthening our own institutions as opposed to looking at what currently exists and trying to do things differently?
It's both. We have to reform the global institutions, and that means voice and accountability. We need bigger, bolder institutions, right? We need a reform of the global taxation to prevent these capital outflows. And much more important, we need to have institutions which do what I've just told you, which help in the intermediation process of the flow of capital from the global north to the global south. But can't work alone at the global level. They'll bring in global reach, they will deal with global public goods, but there's still a big agenda to be handled by countries with local knowledge at regional level, at the continental level. So the reform has to be both global, continental, and regional.
And what about absorption capacity? People say, actually, there isn't an absorption capacity locally to be able to find those bankable projects and to deploy the 100 or the 50 or $100 billion necessary. Do you agree with that, or do you counter that argument?
You know, we've been there before. Look at it differently. If international institutions had bold de-risking mechanisms, absorption capacity would increase. But because precisely we don't have the de-risking instruments, absorption becomes a problem. So it's chicken and egg. So I'd rather have institutions which have not simply partial risk guarantees or first loss, stuff like that. De-risk projects which take long to mature. Let me give an example. If you're going to build a dam, whose cost about maybe $1 million per megawatt, that's the round figure. It will take up to 6 years between conception, design, all right, and financial modeling, all right? But if we are de-risking instrument, both on the ESG, on the financing side, I think we can cut the period to 3 years. So it is not an absorption capacity issue, it's a de-risking issue.
Okay, and is that because projects on the continent need to be gold-plated because the risk is badly perceived? Why does it take a lot longer than other regions?
You heard me say yesterday that we have a zip code problem. So a project in Africa is deemed ex initio to be risky, okay? People take extra layers of care, okay, because there are no instruments to rescue them. But I have seen, you are still young to have seen this. In the 1990s, how Africa led the process of mobile telephony, all right? Because risks are very low in mobile telephony, and the cost of entry are very low, okay? So even the most difficult places, mobile telephony was very rapid, okay? And Africa led the world. Same right now when you come to things like mobile money, okay? You can do more mobile money in East Africa than in the UK, okay? So that is what I call the parts of the industry which are very low risk, very low cost of entry. But energy, for example, which is the opposite, requires precisely higher de-risking instruments. It doesn't mean it is risky. It means the perception of risk is very high, okay? And I think this is why financial institutions really have to double down on this issue.
Okay, so the message is we need to look at new instruments to de-risk, new instruments to match savings with returns, and new instruments that the DFIs and other financial institutions need to put together to be able to deploy more capital to the continent.
For the last 70 years, we have got global financial institutions whose mission has been basically to close the famous resource gap. Okay? But then we found that resources are a gap that is true, but how you deploy the resources is also a problem, which means policy, which means governance, which means capacity, all the kind of stuff. Now, we need institutions which can now move on to the next level, which is the intermediation you're talking about, okay? Match the savings to investments, okay? And do so in a way which provides a return to those who have the savings, but also investment possibilities to the global south. We don't have institutions fit for purpose today because they were set up in 1945 to close the resource gap, okay? But now we know the resource gap is not a real problem. The world glut of savings increases by the year because of aging in places like Japan, South Korea, European countries, okay? Now, when they invest, the returns, real returns, adjusted returns, outside areas like artificial intelligence, robotics, all these kind of things are quite low, okay? So it's a problem for aging societies. In the South, it is opposite problem. And what I'm saying to you, rather than simply raise money, pass it on, right? We're at that phase where we say, okay, how do we deal with this issue of demographics, savings glut, okay, and growing demographics and negative savings? And I believe that the reform of the international financial institutions, outside voice and accountability, taxation, and bigger, bolder, and better, this issue of intermediation should be at the heart of the reform.
Dr. Kaberuka, thank you very much for your time.
Merci.